Good morning. How are you today? It's a beautiful day. Hopefully it's not going to rain, but if it does, we can always be inside sewing. We love that. I'm Reva with Quality Sewing, and I'm so glad you're here. We're going to be doing a AccuQuilt Q&A. I think it's kind of funny, AQQA. I find humor, so I hope you did too. But if you notice, I don't know if you recognize my surroundings, but before I talk about that, I do want to let you all know that all of our stores are open for business. We're so excited. So you're going to have to come and visit us, and we're just so excited to be able to see everyone. Today, checking on questions, I have Carrie, so every once in a while you might hear her voice pop up to say, oh, there's a question. So if you have a question, please type that in the comments, and we're happy to try to answer them. Now, that being said, I'm going to try to answer them. If you stump me, I'll find out later, right? So this is not Stump Reva Day. This is like, let's get some good questions, but don't try not to make them too hard. Anyway, so let's talk about what's behind me. Isn't it yummy? You're in my sewing room at my home. No, you're not. No, really. We're in the Tukwila store, and we now have fabric. It's fabulous, and we really are excited about that as well. And so we want you to come and take a peek and see all this wonderful stuff, and touch and feel and shop to your heart's content. We've curated a really nice amount of fun fabrics that you can use for all different projects, including home deck and craft projects and bags and things like that, as well as quilts. We have a couple of kind of more Northwest themed fabrics and some beautiful prints and other things. And you can't see it all, but when you come in, you will. So you're going to have to come in and shop with us. So now remember, we're open for business, so come in, and we will be looking forward to seeing you. So I have some samples that are kind of laid out. I don't know if you can see things flat on the table. Carrie, can they see things flat on the table?
Yes, they can.
Awesome. Okay, so I do have some samples laid out here made with some of the dyes, but we're going to talk about some general things. Now, I don't know if all of you have an AccuQuilt. If you don't, then let me introduce you to the AccuQuilt system. The AccuQuilt system is really pretty cool. Have you ever been to a craft store or maybe to a school where they cut the paper shapes and letters and things like that out with a die cutter? So you have the dies in the shape of whatever, and then you have the cutter. You put your material, in this case we're working with fabric. You can cut paper, you can cut felt, you can cut all sorts of different things with this, but you would layer that on top, and then we're going to send it through the cutter. So this right here is called the value die, and it has a big square, it's got little half squares, and then a smaller square here, and this actually came with the Go Big. Now the Go Big is pretty neat. I love it. Did you see how?
Real quick, sorry.
Yes.
We have several people asking if all stores have fabric.
Not all stores have fabric. Well, actually, yes, they do. They're cut up in little tiny squares, and you can see how to use a machine with them. But no, yardage fabric is only in our Tukwila location. So
Coming soon too?
Yes, but I was going to save that as a secret, Carrie. She's letting the cat out of the bag. But coming soon, our Everett store is moving to a new location. Will be open in July, and we're going to have fabric there too. So we'll have two locations with bolted fabric, Everett and here in Tukwila. So that's a start. So if you're interested at all in seeing it in more locations, come to Everett or Tukwila and buy lots. Because if we can't keep up with selling this, you might see it pop up in other stores too. Just saying. Anyhow, hope I don't get fired for that one. But but this is the Go Big, and you notice it folds up so it could be stored on a bookshelf or wherever in your sewing room you might want it to go. And how it works is inside the perimeter of this shape, there's a little blade. It's kind of like a cookie cutter. So don't lean on it. It is sharp. You don't want to get cut. But what it's going to do is it's going to cut out the shapes perfectly for you every time. So if you've ever gone to a craft store that has die cutting for scrapbooking, or you've gone to, or if you're a teacher and you've used that for your classrooms, same type of thing. And this is just a little hand crank unit, very, very easy to do. And then we run that through and voila! Doesn't look like much, does it? But take a look. They're perfectly cut little units. And here's my other one right there, little static cling. So they're just absolutely wonderful. So this is perfectly cut. The dog ears are off of them. If you've ever cut triangles, you know how they have the points, and then it makes it kind of a fuss to have to mess with later. So that's how easy the AccuQuilt works. But it doesn't just cut the 2 layers of fabric like I have here. It can cut up to 6 layers of quilted cotton or quilting cotton. So you can take that and you can layer 6 pieces, and you can have big or small. I have smaller pieces here. I could put them over maybe I'll do a big square this time, but you can put them over which part of the die you want to use, or you could cover the whole die. Now, I showed you how it cut, but take a look at what I did here. I have my 6 layers of fabric and I put them right sides together. So actually I will cut out that little triangle again. And take a look at what you can do when you have them right sides together. When they're right sides together, and I'm going to love this a little bit because there's static electricity, and I'm going to slide it off. And then I have my little pieces here, okay? So now all you have to do is take these, and his top fell off. Take this to your sewing machine and you just pick up your pairs together, and you can sew them without having to reorganize your stack of little pieces. So that's pretty cool as well. Okay, now a lot of people will also take their AccuQuilt dies and then they take their extra fabric. So if they have any scrap like this, they run it through and they make squares and put it in their bin, and then they have that ready to go. But I have lots more to show you. Okay, so if you ever quilt or anything, I'm going to take this little guy and I'm going to move him to the side because I'm a wimp. What can I say? Because this guy over here, this is the Go Big. And the Go Big is pretty fabulous because the Go Big is electric, and you don't have to crank it. It cranks for you, right? So that's pretty cool there. So he's all turned on, and this is still 6 layers of fabric, but the difference between the Go and the Go Big is that this has a wider path so you can run multiple dies through at the same time. Or if you have one of the big boards, it can take that. This can take every single die, and this one is limited to the 8-inch boards, and this one can go bigger. So let's talk about doing binding for a minute. So I have this wonderful thing. It's called a strip cutter. This will cut 1, 2, 3 strips that are the width of fabric. So it's going to make your strips for your binding. Okay? And I'll show you this before I put it down. This is the front end of the die, and you'll see this black line right here. Beyond this, on this side, there's no blades, but on this side, there are blades. Okay? So we're going to take our fabric. Where did I put him? Here he is. I have a nice piece of fabric. Excuse me. And it's still folded just as it came off the bolt. So it's folded in half. And I'm going to be able to fan fold this on here because we can cut 6 layers of fabric at a time. And when it's folded in half, that's 2 layers. So we can have 3 folds of that. Does that make sense? So when I put this down, I'm going to line up the fold just inside this black line and just over the line that is right along the bottom here, which is where the blade is. So I'm going to slip that right there. And then I'm going to fold him. Let me slip him over a little bit more because I didn't cut a very straight line when I cut him. And you only need to cut about a 1/4 inch longer than or wider than what you need on each end. So a 1/2 inch total difference. And I'll get that placed right there. And just know as well This piece is a little bit small, but that's okay. But also note that there's different size dies. So if you're not into 2.5 inch strips, maybe you like 3 or 1.5, there's different dies for each size there. So I'm going to pop the mat on there, and it will only cut where there's fabric and there's a mat. So I'm going to pop this in, and it's going to take it through at the same time. Now if you have an AccuQuilt, when you go to use your mat, shift your mat every once in a while so it's not cutting in the exact same spot every time, and that will help your mat last longer. All right. Now, if you've stored your mat and your mat happens to curl, it's okay. It doesn't matter. It will uncurl eventually, and it will still keep things flat. So that's all okay. And so here's all my little extra bits and pieces. And this fabric was a little bit longer than the knives were. So I have just like 2 little strings in my selvage there. Okay, so now I have all these perfectly cut 2.5 inch strips. Miles and miles and miles you can go with that. Okay, so now let me show you a cool trick. Because you know how you take your strips and you want to sew them together to get one long strip? What I do is when I cut out my quilt and I have all my pieces ready to go, I actually cut if I can, cut everything out on my AccuQuilt, because I'm easily distracted. You probably have already noticed. I'm easily distracted, and so a lot of times when I'm cutting with my rotary cutter, oh, look at that, and then I get a little bit of a bumpy line, or my ruler shifts or something, and it's not perfect. When I cut it with the AccuQuilt, everything is accurate time and time again, because the blades don't move, they don't shift, everything is great. So I know when I go to sew, it's more likely it's going to be accurate. You still have to pay attention, because I get kind of distracted when I sew too. But what I do is I pre-cut out my whole quilt, and then what I do before I start sewing my quilt, I actually cut all my binding, and then I sew all the strips together and get them ready to put onto the quilt, because that's not a fun chore. So that way when I go and I'm done with my quilt, my binding is ready to go. So that's really kind of a fun way to do that. Now, I have a friend who works for AccuQuilt, and she taught me this trick, and it's so awesome. I don't know if you ever struggle with doing mitered seams on your binding. So if you haven't done binding before, what we do, instead of sewing 2 pieces together straight like this, if you sew it straight like this and then you're folding it over your project, you get a big lump right there, and it's like a speed bump. It's more visible to the eye, and then you really notice it when you're stitching over, and actually can bulge. So what we like to do is make a seam that's a 45-degree angle, so that way as it's turned, that bulk is distributed out for a bit of a distance, so that way it's easier to go onto the quilt, and it doesn't have that obvious thump when you sew over it. So getting those exact ends though can be a challenge. So my friend Erica from AccuQuilt showed me this tip, and it's really pretty cool. We're going to use the Flying Geese Dye. Now on here, this one came with the Go Big. It has a big triangle that's for your goose, and it's got 2 smaller triangles that's for your sky if you're doing a flying geese block. But this little guy right here, if you look at him, here's one triangle. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to use just 1/2 of this, and we are going to use it to make our mitered corners. Now I'm using a 2.5 inch strip, and if that's the size you like to use as well, you can use any half square triangle that is larger than the width of your strip. So if you have the cubes, which we'll talk about in a minute, any of the block 3s out of any of the cubes are big enough for this trick. So what I'm going to do is we have this triangle right here. Okay, here's my 45-degree angle, and you probably can see that there's a little notch out here. This is where it's going to cut off the dog ears for us so it can sew together very easily. So I'm going to actually align the bottom of my strip along this edge right here. Okay, and I'm going to try to get it in place so you can see it. Now I have my fabric, and I have put the strips together so right sides are up. Okay, now this is the same piece, so that means I have a twisty, it's doing a twisty thing down here in the in halfway, but that's okay. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to line this up on the edge. So see, here's that bottom edge right here. Align that strip right there. It doesn't need to go over it because we don't need to cut it anymore on this side. We just want to cut this diagonal. Okay? So now, as you are probably thinking, but wait, there's other blades. But remember what I said a minute ago? That if your blade to cut needs fabric and a mat, if we put this mat down and we don't cover up that bottom blade, it's not going to cut. So that's pretty fabulous. So I'm just going to hold that. I'm actually going to double check it since I pulled it up into the air, right? So let me rearrange that and slip this on, and we'll send it through. Now when I was getting my AccuQuilt, I actually got my AccuQuilt for a very, very good reason. And the reason was I didn't have one, so I figured I needed to buy one, right? Oh. And then if you're an idiot and you forget what you're doing, you'll cut the whole thing off. So we'll do that again. Told you I get distracted. Let's try that again. I'm going to put the two edges right sides up. Oh, have you ever done stuff like that at home? Never, right? Okay, I've got that on. This time, I'm going to offset that little mat so he's not covering up. Now, the blade's not covered. Facebook Live is great. You can't hide that you do something crazy. Erica, if you're watching, my friend, you can teach someone, but they can't necessarily do it. Okay.
Lucinda said she was actually waiting for you to do that. So.
Lucinda, why didn't you share with me that I did? Okay, fine. I thought you guys were my friends, but whatever. All right, so here's my pieces. I've got my two perfect 45-degree angles, and all you need to do is match them up. And with the dog ears, here, if I do this, can you see them pretty well on here? So there's no dog ears to trim. So now you can sew your 1/4-inch seam, and you're going to get a perfect miter every time. Now, remember how I said align the bottom edge along the blades, but you don't have to overlap them. If you do, you cut them. Don't do that either. So I hope you're getting the gist of the idea. But again, apparently you don't need to stump Reva. I'm going to stump myself. So that's perfectly fine. Okay. So but anyway, like I said, I got my AccuQuilt because I didn't have one. I figured I should get one, right? You gotta have all the gadgets, but I gotta tell you, this is like one of the best purchases I've made in a long time. I pre-cut all my quilt kits, and then I just put them in little boxes, and they're ready to go when I want to sew them out. I actually love the process of just cutting them. Which is really weird because I hate using scissors. Okay, we're going to do something else with our little strips here. These are all 2.5 because that's what this is. We're going to lay them so that way they are parallel along this black line. And we're going to fan fold those. So I'm going to take that and fan fold, and you do want them to be kind of aligned. So give me a second because I have to align them. All right, so there's that one. And you can do as few or as many of these as you want. And I'm only going to do 2 strips to show you because I don't want you to be bored.
And also, Gail wanted you to know that she knows she'd probably make that same error, so it made her feel better to see you do it first.
Thank you, Gail. I'm so glad I'm in good company. You know, I'm a firm believer that you can become quite proficient at your craft if you mess it up a lot, because then you go like, oh gosh, seriously, and you tend to kind of remember. All right, so I have just 2 strips here, but you can fill the whole board, okay? So I'm going to offset my mat a little bit, because remember I said you don't need to cover in the same spot. It'll make your mat last longer if you kind of offset them, you know, every once in a while. All right. Now, if I was only going to do these 2 down here, I didn't need this big mat. I should have taken the small one and done that, and then it would have just cut that, and it would have been faster because I could have pulled the whole die out sooner. Does that make sense? I'll show you in a second. But you only need a mat for the area that you want to cut. Now I have all these perfectly cut little 2.5-inch squares. Isn't that cool? So now you're ready, and if you're ready to go to town with these, and if you had them right sides together, then you could just take them to your sewing machine and you could sew. So that's pretty fun. Okay, so now I have a plethora of these, and I want to show you, I'll show you on the next one what I was talking about with the mat. Now, you also have a wonderful set of angles here. You got 45 degrees, 60, and 30. So if you wanted to do a star. Now, I'm not a quilter. I like to quilt. I can't put it in the show. I don't want to put it in the show. I do it for myself for the fun of it, right? So there's probably a certain star that this is, but Lemoyne comes to mind. I don't know if that's the right name. If it is, yay, I figured it out. If not, you can correct me, but I probably won't remember. So I put these along my 60-degree angle. This is where that line is, and I line those up. Now if I take the small one and just cover the fabric and the blades like that, then when I send that through, it's mad at me. When I send it through, then it's going to only cut right where that is, and then it will free up this mat sooner, and I can just pull that out quicker. Because, you know, we get impatient. Yes, ma'am.
Reva, how do you know if you need to replace a mat?
Oh, if you get a hole and you can see through it, get a new one. If you have a tread worn that is really obvious and there's a break in it, shift it, okay? And then if you do it the same side down all the time, it might start to curl. Flip it over. When you get tired of looking at it, and if it's not cutting, well, get a new mat. I always have a brand new one. Where'd I put it? I had a brand new one here. I always, at home, I have a brand new one sitting and waiting for me just in case. And this size is a good size because if you want to run a couple of dies through at one time, you don't want to put one big mat. You want smaller mats. So the rule of thumb is you use a mat, the smallest mat you can, to cover what you want to work, because you really don't need to waste a big mat on an area you're not cutting, and you do not want to use a small die and a big mat because the drag may cause the pieces not to cut well or something like that. But look at what I cut without having to think about it. There's little diamonds, and then you can sew them back together and get a star. That's cool, right? You didn't even have to think about it. So that's pretty fabulous. So, all right. You know, I'm going to ask for forgiveness later. You know, if they can pick it up. I'll pick it up off the floor. Don't worry. I'm not leaving it for anybody else, but there it is. Okay. What?
Martha Stewart would.
Martha Stewart would. I'm not Martha Stewart. Okay. All right. All right. So there, it's clean. Isn't that nice? Don't you wish you could clean your sewing room that fast? Okay, so that is the strip cutter. Oh, I put it away. I want to show you something else. So we have this strip cutter. I'm going to get it back out. What if you want to make bias, like real bias strips? So you have your fabric, and fabric has, sorry, I hope I'm not too far off camera here, but if you get your fabric has the selvage down here, right? So this is the lengthwise grain. This is the length that comes on the on the bolt, and then you have your crosswise grain, and those are very stable. In fact, it's preferred that when you send your dies through the machine, that the selvage or the lengthwise grain goes this way and enters into the die machine that way. That one was the Cleopatra's fan. If you saw that fall off, she got bored and I moved the thing that was holding her down. Anyhow, you want to make sure the lengthwise grain is going this way, and you can kind of tell the difference, because if you do that to your fabric, because you might not always have a selvage on it, but if you pop, it'll go pop, pop. If you go the other way, it goes thud, thud. Did you hear that? So the pop, pop, the higher octave one is the length of grain and is the most stable, and the cross grain is not as strong. So put it so the length of grain is going lengthwise as it goes into the cutter, and you're going to have more accurate cutting. Okay. You'll also notice on the dies, do you see how they're not perfectly straight on that die? The reason it's angled is so that way when it goes into the machine, it has a little bit of cutting to do, and then it gets to be bigger. Instead of, if you had it straight on it, it would go, oh, cut. It would be one big speed bump instead of angling the car one wheel at a time over the speed bump. So that's why they're not set on there perfectly straight, but you're okay to set your fabric straight according to the dies versus the board. Okay, all right, so let's talk about, yes?
Quick question. Somebody would like to know, how do they get a die to cut the correct size 5-inch square?
If you want to cut a 5-inch square, I started the machine. By gum, get a 5-inch square die. I actually, personally, I ordered a strip cutter that was a 5-inch strip. And it finishes when it's sewn at 4.5 inches. And the reason I ordered that is because there's a lot of times I'm working with a pattern that's made to work with charm packs and things like that. So having the 5-inch strip cut, then I could do it crossways like I showed you for making the squares, and voila, you have 5-inch squares. So that's kind of a fast and easy way to get a lot of 5-inch squares that way. So if that's not the question you're wanting answered, bonus and just ask again, and Carrie will tell me again. Okay, so let's talk about doing bias. So we have our lengthwise grain here and our crosswise grain here, and if at 45 degrees, you've got a lot of stretch. Look at that. It doesn't even thump thump, okay? And if you're doing a quilt that has a curved corner or rounded edges in some way, you really want to use it on bias, because the binding will actually go around those shapes. If you're doing a Biani backpack or bag that has the binding on the seam allowances for a clean finish, you'll want those to be on bias so they'll wrap around the little corners easier. So you can do that on this too. You don't have to just do it straight or grain. So let me show you that down there. So here's my piece of fabric, and actually I'm going to give myself a little bit of space here so I can show you. Hold on. Okay. So I have my piece of fabric here, and it is cut the width of fabric by 18 inches. And this is kind of a good thing to write down. So it's 18 inches by the width of fabric. And I actually did cut this. I cut it very precisely with my rotary cutter, so I knew that I had a nice right angle, and these are straight with the fabric. So what you're going to want to do is take the corner that's away from you and fold it up so that way the edge meets the edge of that corner, so which is the selvage, meets the long cut part of the fabric. Do you see that? Okay. Then I'm going to do the same thing with the other side, but I'm going to start with the corner that's closest to me and fold that down and match the selvage with that raw edge. So what we end up with is this. Hope you can see that. Okay. Then what I want to do is make this fit on our board here. So remember we've got our little line here, which means don't put any fabric to that side because then it's not going to cut. But what I'm going to do first is I have my folded angle here and a folded angle here. I'm going to rotate this so my folded angle is just over that cut line. Okay? Just over it. Because I need it to cut that little angle, the fold off. Okay? Then, oh, not yet. I lied to you. I lied to you, I'm sorry. The first thing you want to do is flip this up and fold it this way, so it's in half. Okay? Do it that way first. Then we will take our fold and put on there somewhere.
Can I interrupt you?
Yes, please.
So a couple questions have come in while you get it sorted. She said that she has it, but it's not cutting it in 5 inches. I'm not sure what that means. Maybe we'll connect with her after.
Yeah.
But another question was that what you're saying is that you can use a smaller mat than the die that it's on. Yes,
as long as your what the part that you want to cut is smaller. You want to cover everything that you want to cut. I wouldn't suggest you take this mat and another mat and lay a bunch of little mats on something that's bigger because it's not going to give you a good cut. You need, if you have a strip cutter, you need the big strip cutter die. But if you're only doing a portion, then you only need to cover what you need to cut. Okay? All right, so we're starting over with this because
we have one more question about bias tape. Sorry. So bias tape, when you lay fabric, as you described, won't you lose a lot of fabric because you need to join them, requiring you to buy more yardage?
No. You're going to join them, and anytime you join them, you're going to need to stitch them, and you have to cut off that waist anyway because the fabric comes square, it's square off the bolt, right? It doesn't come at a 45-degree angle, what we did before, right? So you would be cutting that off as you sew anyhow. Now, we'll take a look at the ends on our bias piece and see if they look different. I rarely cut bias strips because I do straight of grain. I only do bias when I'm doing like a handbag project or something like that. So I always give myself, when I measure the quilt or I know the finished size of the quilt, I always make sure I give myself plenty of extra, at least a half of a strip, so 20 inches extra, because I know I need to miter that end and you need tails that are big enough for you to work with. If you were to tie your shoe with short shoelaces, yeah, you could do it, but it's really fiddly and it's hard to do it. So if you have longer shoelaces, it's easier to tie them. Does that kind of make sense? Okay, so let's go back here because I got distracted and I told you wrong. So you have this little guy here. So we are going to line that folded edge right along that blade, just over the blade because we want it to cut. Okay, and I'm going to move this up a little bit because it's dragging behind the table there and it's trying to come off. Now, this fold, I'm going to fold up to meet it. Okay, so now I have a fold on each side. All right, then this little guy is going to get folded down. And can you see? Now I have a nice straight edge. So I'm going to shimmy him up to just underneath my line. Okay, see? It's up here now. And then I'm going to fold this one up so it is inside my cutting blades. Now, you can't see the cutting blades here because there's no reference line down there. If you want to, you can take a Sharpie, maybe in a different color so you know it's not that line, and put your ruler down, a straight ruler, and mark where the end is so you know that you need to stay within that. I also will Sharpie mark on my die boards, and I'll talk about that in a minute because I get distracted. So if I forget to tell you, remind me. Okay, so now this is all folded up, and the fold is parallel with that fold. Everything is nice and straight. Okay, should I show you that again before we cut it? So we had this piece here, right? And we're gonna line that so that way the fold is over the blade, okay? And then we're gonna fold the other opposite fold to match up with that fold. Ta-da. Okay, and then we'll take our little dog ear down, and I'm meeting him up right together, right here, which gives it a nice square end. And then I'll just shift him up so I'm taking advantage of the full length of our board. And if you want to do all the pre-folding at your ironing board, that's good, and you can give it a little press, and that helps. So now it looks like a little present. And then we'll just take our guy here. What did I do with the mat? I put it up. Go figure. And we'll pop him on there and then send it through. So now what we're making is we're making our bias. And I can't remember how many yards of bias you end up with from this strip, but you get quite a bit. So it will cut more than you think it may. All right. So now remember there's static electricity, so I'm going to give it some love and then slide it off. And then there is strip on bias. And they already have the 45 degree because I cut them at squares. So they already have a 45 degree on them. So that doesn't waste anything because you're not having to trim that off. Okay, so that's pretty cool, isn't it? I think that's pretty neat. All right, so that's bias. Now, when I got my AccuQuilt, the first AccuQuilt I got was a little one, and this was a while ago. They don't make them anymore, but it was called a Go Baby, because there was the Baby, the Go, and then the Go Big. So I got the Go Baby because a friend of mine had one at a quilt retreat that I went to, and I used it and I made like little pinwheel blocks. It was so easy and I was just enamored with it. So I bought that little guy, and I bought him on clearance, and he didn't come with anything. It was just the machine. And so I needed to buy a die or dies, and I was really at a loss as what I might want. And so I bought a couple because they were on clearance. You know how you do that? You buy something on sale and then you're like, what do I ever want to do with this? But I had it. It was a good deal, right? But I never really could figure out what dies I wanted to get to be able to make a quilt. Because in my mind, the reality was that I want to make this quilt for my sister-in-law. I like my sister-in-law, but let's just go with that thought, right? So I want to make a quilt for my sister-in-law. And so that means that I need to buy this die, this die, this die, this die, this die to make that quilt for my sister-in-law who is really rude and I don't like her. Not true, this is fake, okay? So sister-in-law, I'm not talking about you. But if you spend all that money to make one quilt, then are you stuck making that same quilt over and over and over? So I had a hard time committing to what dies I thought were most valuable to be able to invest in, because that's what they are. They can be an investment. Then AccuQuilt came out with something called the cube system. Now this I thought was just absolutely brilliant, because in this box you have 8 different basic geometric shapes, so you can make just about any quilt block you want because you get them all in one little handy little package. So this one happens to be the I think this is the 8-inch. No, it's the 9-inch. So what that means is that these pieces will go together to make a 9-inch finished block. But of course you can use the pieces in anything you want to. You don't have to make a block. You could do a border or whatever you want. But they're nice and beautifully organized. Each one has a little paper that has a little pattern on it and instructions. It comes with a DVD of how to use the cube system. It even comes with a mat. Let's see if it's still in here. That goes right here, but it comes with a mat, so you're ready to go. Everything you need is in one box to make, in this case, a 9-inch cube. And they say that you can make 72 different block styles out of this one box. And I think it actually makes more. I think they said 72 because they couldn't fit any more on the page, right? So there's the 72 that they say that you can make. All right, so there's a 6, an 8, a 9, a 10, and a 12-inch finished block. Now, which one do you get? I was stymied. What one should I get? Should I start with the 6, the 8, the 9, the 12? Well, I decided I didn't want a 12 because I don't want these huge, because think about the boards are this big, right? I don't want this big, huge block. Well, that's because I was dumb and I didn't realize that all the pieces go together to make a finished 12-inch block, and that's not really that big. I was thinking it would be like this big, but I didn't want to do that, so I thought, well, which one should I get? I go, you know, I really like those quilts that have the small block with a big block and nestle them together. So I decided I would get the 12 and then I'd get the 6 because half of 12 is 6, right? So that made sense. They could go together. But 6 and 12 are both divisible by 3. So if I add the 9 in there, then I can really mix and match and have some fun if I got the 6, the 9, and the 12. But an 8 and a 12 and a 6 are all divisible by 2. So therefore, I needed the 8-inch block as well. And then they came out with the 10. And those are all divisible by 2. So if you get them all, you have them all. So that's what I did. I got them all. And I haven't been sorry because now there isn't a size that I don't have. So, and like I said, I actually pre-cut my quilt kits out. I buy the pattern, I buy the fabric, and then I see what sizes of units it needs, and I use my cubes to cut them out. Now, if you love your cube and you already have them, they also have something called the corners. And with the corner set, they are sized as well, and that can go and complement whichever cube you have. So if you have the 9-inch cube at home, you would want the 9-inch corners, and then you could do 72 additional blocks. So what are we up to now? That'd be 148, 44, 100, I don't know. It gives you a lot more, right? 72 and 72, 144. Okay, and then if you get the angle set, again, if you have a 9-inch cube, you would want to get the 9-inch companion angles, and then there's even 72 more blocks that you can do there. But think about it. Actually, the number is endless because they just couldn't fit any more on a page. Now, if you want this catalog, this is the cube catalog, and in the very front, it has basic information about the cube, but it also shows you the different shapes that go into using the system and what the shapes and sizes are for all the different sizes. I keep this right with my AccuQuilt so I can always refer to it. But if you want one of these and don't have one, it's a great tool. Come into our stores and we'll get you one, okay? And then you also have, there is a full catalog that shows every die that they make. And I actually mark off when I have like the strip cutters or whatever, I mark them off so I know by just flipping through my catalog what I have, what I need, and that sort of thing. Okay.
Just so you know, Marcia had the same conversation with herself about buying all of them.
Oh, well, Marcia, good, we're in good company, but right, then there isn't anything you can't do. I'm sure of it. So, yeah, I have a sickness, but I enjoy it. So thank you for joining in with me in that craziness. So the cubes are pretty cool, but there's a couple of more things that I want to mention to you. Before this event started, we had asked if anyone had any questions to go ahead and email them into us, and hopefully I've answered most people's questions, but one came up that was really, really good, and her comment was that she doesn't quilt, so what is she gonna do with the dies? And if you don't want to take up quilting, because that would be the first answer, right? But you could do applique and do beautiful things. This is done with wool felt, and they cut out beautifully with wool felt. You can't do 6 layers of wool felt. You're going to do maybe 1 or 2, but they're perfectly cut out. So you could do applique on things for bags, home deck, garments, all sorts of things like that. I cut this out earlier, and I just put the fabric right here and only covered that one spot, and I cut out these really cute little flowers. So you can add these, you can make a little, have you seen those cute little brooches, you know, that you put the little flower? You could take all the little petals. You could do some really cute crafty things. Oh, you can make what do they call them, like a hair pretty? You know, for a little girl, you could do anything. Don't do it for the little boys. They usually don't like those, but maybe they would. That's all fine.
A couple questions, Reva.
Yes.
Would the Everett store have that catalog? They should, right?
Yes, yes, they should have it.
Okay.
And if for some reason they do not, we should have them here in the warehouse, and they just need to restock. Just bear in mind that we have been closed for a little bit, so things may be a little bit whoa when you get there.
So, Shelly would like to know, is there a deal if you get the whole set?
Oh, Shelly, you want a whole set, baby? I will get you a whole set. We will talk. No, but there is a nice deal on our website. If you put in and thank you, Shelly, for asking, because I forgot to mention it. We are offering a discount on all the AccuQuilt product, all the dyes. You'll find that the machines are already marked at a price, but the dyes and the mats are additional 10% off if you put in the code ACCU10.
That's number 10, 10.
Yes, 10, thank you. So ACCU10 when % off. And if you're in the store, you can do it there too. So just don't go this second, because we got to make sure we remind them that you can get the extra 10% off. Okay. So
also, what happens if you feed the boards in backwards?
If you feed, oh, you mean instead of this way, you do it this way? Mm-hmm. Then it cuts this first. So there's no right or wrong. On this die, this one has this side. I don't know that anything would be wrong if you fed this end in first, but this board is set up a little differently because you have to know where the blade starts, and so you want to make sure that you have the fold inside that line, so it's more of a visual reference than anything else, because the mat going on top of it should hold everything in place. You know, so there shouldn't be anything wrong with it that way. If you have your length of grain going this way and you put it in this way, and you have the crossways grain going with it, it might go stretcha, right? Because it's rolling and it's like it has a little bit more ability to move, whereas a straight of grain doesn't have the capability to shift. Okay. Other thing I wanted to talk about, and these are great questions, about applique, is that there's some really cool appliques, and you can even cut leather on vinyl with them. And so this would be really awesome on a handbag. If you were even making a handbag out of leather or cork, oh my goodness, wouldn't that be cool to cut some awesome shapes out of cork. And if you are not even into quilting, but you want the look, right? If you took some of the basic geometric shapes and you cut that out of cork, then you could align them along the bottom of a tote bag or something like that and stitch them on, and it'd be really cool. Oh, and speaking of stitch on, if you embroider, all of the applique shapes that are the basic applique shapes from AccuQuilt that are not licensed, like with a person's name on it, there's free embroidery design downloads to go with them. So with a satin stitch outline, and then there's the grass stitch, and I think a motif. So there's 3 different ways to stitch them down, and you can just download those for free off of the AccuQuilt website. But if it's like a Sarah Vedler or Ricky Timms, then you purchase those designs. You can't download those for free. Okay, so that's just a really cool thing too. So let your mind just go crazy. And if it's not crazy enough, if you like to make a certain wallet or something like that, and you don't want to cut out the pieces, you can custom order a custom die for whatever you want. So that is a possibility too. So if you're into doing something all the time. And another die that oh, it's down here. Here's something else that's not, this isn't quilting, but maybe you want to make a burp cloth. There's one of these with a baby bib. So there's other things besides quilting that you can get for your AccuQuilt. In fact,
Marilyn also mentioned that you can use those applique shapes for making matching greeting cards.
oh, that's a great idea. Yeah, and you could use up your scraps of your fabric, or you can cut paper with these as well, and it doesn't damage the blade. Unless it had metallic in it. If it had any type of metallic, like you know how some of the fabric has the metallic threads running through, I don't think that would damage, but it might dull over time if that's all you cut, right? So but that's a great idea. The greeting cards, I love that idea.
And then Reva, what Candace is actually asking, she has a Go Me, and she's not sure which dies work with it. So how can she tell which one will work with hers?
That is a fabulous idea. Let me see if I can find. All right, we're gonna pretend for a minute. Okay, on the dies, yeah, this one doesn't on the dies except for the one I have in my hand. Oh, hold on. I have this one too. Aha, there you go. So you see this right here? That little scale down at the bottom tells you which dies or which machines this can work in. So it says go big, go, and go baby. And since this one has an X in all three of them, it's usable on all of the machines. If it wouldn't work in the go baby, then that would not have an X in it. It would simply have the orange and the green X. AccuQuilt is very color coordinated. And if you look in the catalog as well, Carrie's sleeping.
No, I'm reading comments.
Yeah. So if you take a look, can you see the little stars? That's telling you the machine. Now I'm going to shift here. Carrie's going to stay there. I'm going to shift there. See, it tells you at the bottom which machines those stars mean. So the catalog is really awesome to have because then at a glance you can see which dies will work for your machine. Okay, and they even make the strip cutters that are narrow enough to go through the Go Baby. In fact, if you don't have a Go Baby and you want, this is a really cool strip. Have you ever done like the two-colored binding? There's actually a strip cutter that has, trying to find it here, that has the different sizes. It has a 1, a 1.5, and a 2-inch strip cutter, so it cuts the 3 different sizes, and then you have a nice selection of different widths, which is pretty cool. So take a look for the color coding. So if you have a Go Baby, you want to look for the the pink asterisk in the catalog, or the pink square with the X through it, or just know if it's 6 inches in width, it will go through your baby. Whereas if it's 8 inches or wider, it needs the Go. If it's 10 inches, it would need the Go Big. Okay, so now that's the other reason why I chose, when I purchased my Go, I got the Go Big, is because I am a girl who does not like to be limited by anything. So I never wanted a die to come out that I wouldn't be able to use, because you know that's the one I want to use, probably on principle more than anything else, but that would be the one I want. Also, I was afraid that over time, you know how sometimes when the weather changes, your hands don't feel real great? I was worried that if I invested in a hand crank, maybe my hands wouldn't want to turn the handle over time, and I didn't want to replace my machine. So, but if you don't mind, get this guy, and if you later want to replace that, then you're good, because you can take this to retreats, you can take it in your RV, and you can have fun. But other dies that you might think about is something like this. This is a project die. And so this one actually makes, you'll never guess what this makes. Yeah, it's a Christmas stocking. But, you know, it is June, and Christmas is coming soon. Believe it or not, oh, it'll be there before we know it. This is really fun. So it cuts out the cuff and it cuts out the stocking part, so you can take all that extra quilted fabric, any appliques that you have, or maybe you have an embroidery that is an orphan embroidery that you did a test out, you can turn it into a stocking. Really fun. And then just either applique or maybe machine embroider the person's name on it, or put your name on all of them, and then Santa will just bring everything to you, which is not a bad idea, right? And then I have some more that I wanted to show you. Speaking of Christmas, though, I'll show you this guy. He is so cute. So this one is meant, the pattern they show is meant for him to be in a quilt block, right? But he would be darling on that stocking, or think how cute he would be if you put right sides together and just stitched around him. You can make little men or little dolls that are stuffed, make little stuffies. Wouldn't that be fun? You could put like curly hair on them. Oh man, if you make some, you got to send us the pictures, because that would be such a hoot to see. So that would be really fun. Put catnip in it and make a cat toy. That would be fun too.
Hey, Reva,
so, yes.
someone's wanting to know, can they get the Arkansas Traveler die?
The Arkansas Traveler die is really awesome, and that is an event special die. And when the next time that we have an AccuQuilt sponsored event, I'm not sponsored, then you can order it, but we cannot get that unless we're having a sponsored event. So I wish I could say yes, we could get that for you, but the answer is we'll have to wait till we have a sponsored event from AccuQuilt to be able to order that. But if you're wondering what on earth is the Arkansas Traveler, that's a style of block, and it is, all the pieces are on the board to make that block. For example, this one here is called Local Color, and it makes, you have all the pieces to make this guy. You have this one here, and all the pieces are on this board to make this, and it has a name, but I don't remember. Remember, I don't quilt. Winding Ways. I quilt, but I'm not a quilter. Okay, so all the pieces you need are all on one board. So even though we can't get the Arkansas Traveler right now, you have the Lemoyne Star, we have the Cleopatra's Fan that fell down. That one was really pretty cool. Actually, Carrie, could you just hand that guy to me? It's really an intricate pattern, but it goes together so easy because the die cuts the little notch for you to match. And then all the curves just go together so easy. So that was a fun one to do. And then, let's see, these ones were just applique, little shapes that you could get. The star is an applique, or just a shape pattern. And then this is pillow. Yes?
Do you have the AccuQuilt mask dies in stock to pick up?
The mask dies were we were able to get them in a very, very limited quantity. So whether or not we have them in stock, I am not sure. We would have to check on that for you. But the mask dies do come in different sizes. Just bear that in mind. There's a large, which is manly size. There's medium, which is more lady size. In fact, lady sized. There it is. And then there's I believe a small as well. So when you inquire, make sure you know which one that you want, and we will see if we can't order that for you. I do not know how many, if any, we have in stock, but that's something we can check for you. Good question, though.
On the stocking, they want to know what cutter that it can be used with.
This cutter, well, let's just find out, shall we? Because this is the Go. It fits. So if you have the Go or the Go Big, you can use the stocking. So, but you will want to make sure you have the big strip, the big mat that we were using on the strip cutter to cover this guy up.
Oh, great. And then someone else is asking, do you have any samples of the sunbonnet suit?
I do not. I do not. And I have seen some though that are so cute, and I don't think they have any up on the wall. A lot of times our samples rotate, someone makes one and then they take it home. But the Sunbonnet Sue is so cute, and I think there is even a Sam die as well. So but just know they're a traditional applique pattern. And so if you've ever seen a Sunbunnut Sue or Sunbunnut Sam, they look pretty much like that. They're pretty cool.
I'll ask you one more question and then I'll let you move on. Sorry. Pamela would like to know, can you use the dies on the scan and cut?
Can you use the dies on the scan and cut? You cannot use the dies on the scan and cut, but you could use the pieces that you cut from the dies. And I think I know which Pamela this is. So anyway, as she's trying to do Stump Reva, right? So you could take your piece that you've cut and you could scan it, but then you already have it cut. So,
If you needed more than one, you could do that.
But you could do 6 at a time. So I'm trying to see why you theoretically can do just about anything, but there is a fundamental difference between the scan and cut and the AccuQuilt, and they're both necessary because you have to have everything. But the scan and cut will cut one layer of fabric at a time. That's how it's designed to do. So if you have something like a I don't know, a pug dog, and it's for one person, you need to make one pug, and you never want to make another pug because you're allergic to pugs, then you do it on the scan and cut, because then you'll never do your pug again. But if you're doing something that you want the preciseness, because it's going into a quilt and you're going to have more than one, maybe you have a dozen pugs, right? You need them to be accurate and exact, and you cut 6 layers out all at one time and be done. And if you want to put fusible on the back, you can do that too. Just count the fusible as a half a layer of fabric. So instead of doing 6 layers of fabric, I would probably do like 4 that had the fusible on the back. Okay, and then you could use those in your embroidery and your applique. Okay, so I hope that answers that question. All right. Okay, so I'm trying to think of what else, other fun stuff I want to show you. It's all fabulous. Remember, put right sides together if you're doing your basic pieces, because that way when you take the units to your machine, you can cut those and just pick up the stack and go. Oh, and I told you I was going to tell you the... Sorry, I inhaled my hair. I was going to tell you the little tip about the Sharpie marker, what I do with that. So, if you have a die, this is not my die, so I will not be actually doing this on here. But if I have a die and I want to know what size of fabric that I need for this, I'm going to come and take my handy dandy tape measure, and I'm going to measure the width. So this one is 7.5 by 9. So I'm going to add a 1/2 inch to both. So that would be 8 by 9.5 would be my size of my fabric. And I could pre-cut like strips with the fabric strips that are 9 inches wide, or 9.5, or whatever the case is. But I will take my Sharpie and I'll write that actual size, that, would I say 8 by 9.5, I would write that right here. So that way when I look at my piece, I could know that's the minimum size fabric piece that I need. And then if you have an older die that is all one color and you don't have the 2-color foam, you could actually go with your Sharpie right around where that blade is and mark it so you could see it. So that's another thing you can do. Now let's talk about fabric wastage for a minute, because a lot of people think that if they're cutting a square that's bigger than their piece, then they're going to waste fabric with the AccuQuilt system. And I'll show you why that isn't exactly the case. But before I do, take a look at this die. Do you see the little notches? Can you see the little triangles there? This is really cool. So that way when you stitch it together, they come right back together and they sew out really nice, because you're going to match the notches on the pieces when you put them together. So if I'm cutting out pieces and I'm cutting a lot of them, and I'm using my basic shapes or whatever I'm using, if I cut my fabric just a little bit bigger, that 1/4 inch, and I stack them 6 at a time, I'm going to get a lot of pieces. They're all going to be the same, and I'm not having to readjust my hand with a ruler. Have you ever cut out your pieces with a rotary cutter and you have your fabric there and you cut, and that's great. You cut the next strip, that's great. Then you get to the next one, all of a sudden it's starting to tip ever so slightly and you have to clean up and re-straighten your edge to keep going. You won't have to do that with your AccuQuilt. So you're actually, you can be a little bit more conservative on your fabric. And in fact, some people, I had mentioned about taking scraps and cutting them down. So if you have a scrap of fabric, a lot of people will take their 2-inch strip cutter and just make the 2-inch strips where they can, and if it's smaller, make 2.5-inch strips or 2.5-inch squares, and then they have a scrap bin with those sizes in there, and they can just pull that when they want to put it into a scrappy quilt. So they're already pre-cut for you. So that's kind of a fun thing to do as well. And that works really nice in my wheelhouse because I tend to not save scraps very much unless it's a really decent usable piece. And if you pre-cut them, then that saves tons of time there as well. Okay.
So what dye if you are doing a multicolor in square, and how do you do that?
A multicolor in square? So I hope you're a good typist. Are you meaning a square in a square where you have the square and then you have the square? I'm not quite understanding, so hopefully you'll type back to Carrie and she can help me.
Yeah, because that's what it says. So
okay.
Hopefully she'll...
Yeah, so respond to that if you could, and then that would be great. What I showed you earlier with the mitered corner or the mitered ends on the strips, any of the die number 3 in any of the sizes would work with a 2.5-inch strip. So that's just that triangle unit right there. So you could use that to miter off your corners as well. So pretty cool. All right, did she get back with you on that one yet?
She may still be typing.
Okay. All right. All right. So unless there's other questions, so I'll try to drag on a moment so that way if she responds back with a clarification there, we can try to answer that. But AccuQuilt is really pretty awesome because they do have just a tons of different dyes. I find that my cutting time is decreased by a huge major amount. Cutting is not my favorite part. It never has been my favorite part, especially using scissors. The only thing I like using about scissors is when you cut out a pattern, it goes whoop, whoop, whoop on your table. I think that sounds really awesome, but I was fortunate enough that when I was sewing when I was a teenager, my mother cut everything out for me because I hated it. So being able to cut things out accurately so I can get an accurate seam when I'm done is awesome, and also being able to sew faster. Oh, and talking about fabric wastage, I don't find that to be the case because when I get yardage for a quilt, I have a ton left over anymore, enough for multiple projects that are smaller after that, and that didn't always used to be the case when I used my rotary cutter. Okay, she has an answer.
So she says, like the dye she just used where you want to do 2 colors.
Oh, thank you. Yes. So now what was the original question? Because I've already forgotten.
Where you want to do square and square.
You want to do 2 different colors on one die. Okay. Doop-de-doop. Okay, so we have one die here. I've got, this is the Flying Geese, and we have the goose, and then we have the sky, and they need to be different colors because that's how Flying Geese work, and you have to have a piece big enough to cover what you want to cut. So I would cover this up with the fabric I want my goose to be at, and I'm going to I usually take my edge and I align it so it's even with that bottom edge, so I know it's on square, and then slide it down to cover. And then we'll take our other piece and cover up the other one. Okay, now just remember you can do up to 6 layers, so you can do 6 here and 6 here, and that's pretty cool. And then just cover it up and send it through. Then you're going to get the 2 different colors on the one board. If I wanted my geese to be of different colors, I could layer those 6 colors, could all be different. They don't have to all be the same color. And same thing with the sky. I used the same, these two are both pink, but I could have put blue and pink there, and I could have put blue and purple here and got my geese. Okay? So I hope that answers that question. So that's how you would lay that out. If you're doing the strip, you could do a similar thing. I have done that as well, where I've laid a piece of fabric from here down to get 2 strips, and then I laid another one here. Oh, I'll show you that too. Well, not completely, but kind of. So if I want this fabric to be part of it, right? Now I can't even remember what I was going to show you. Oh my gosh, does that ever happen to you? No, that wasn't it. Well, it was really cool, whatever it is, but I don't remember. Okay, so I was talking about doing 2 here and 1 here. If you have a fabric, I'll do this and maybe it'll rise to the top. But if you have a fabric here and they overlap this line, and you have another fabric here, you have to count those as a layer. So if you have 4 layers here and 2 layers here, you're good, because that would right here would be 6 layers, and that would be okay. But you can't do 6 here and 2 here, or 6 here and 6 here if they overlap, because then that's too much, and it may break the machine. So that's not good. Oh, storing of the boards. This is not what I remembered, so I hope I remember. You want to store your boards up on end. So if you notice on this cabinet, it's pretty cool. It has little divisions, and this is a horn cabinet made special for the AccuQuilt, and it has the nice divisions to store those. And on the back side I have a drawer, and I have other shelving and cubbies back here that I can put my cubes and things on, and it gives you a nice big surface, and the ends do fold down. But you do want to store them up on end, because if you store them this way and the weight, these things weigh a fair amount, and if you have something on top of them, you can actually curl the edge of your blade, and then it will not work. And it's still not coming. I don't remember what I was going to say.
Does it matter if they lean?
They can lean, they just can't stack flat, or shouldn't, because you may be unhappy because you won't be able to cut something when you want to. So.
And then, so they're asking if you can, the straight dies, she said the straight dies I can figure out, but she's asking about the curved one, if you can show how to cut out the curved one.
Oh, in multicolors in that one?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I gotcha. To figure out where I put it. I think I put it down here, didn't I? I probably put it up.
And just something, a cool point of reference, we have somebody all the way from Norway joining us today.
Norway?
Yes.
What time is it in Norway? Is it dinner time? You've got to be much later. It's tomorrow there, isn't it? So tell us what time it is. It's 11:13 a.m. here, so it's not that time there. Okay, so this one, if you want to do this, I do take these, and he's got a little section here. Okay, let me go back general for a moment. Some bobs, if it's meant to have a different colors like this on the bob, which means block on board, you can make a whole block from this one board. This is a bob. This was a bob as well. It's organized in a way so color 1 is grouped together, color 2 is grouped together, color 3 is grouped together. This one is assuming you want to do 2 colors. So it's got the light pink, where'd it go? It's got the light pink and the dark pink together. Okay, so it's got the 2 colors. So if you want to curate your own placement, you can do that. If I wanted just this piece in this fabric, I could lay that right there and lay as many as I want. Like I could do the 6 for this one, and then I could maybe do these guys. You just whatever you do, they're going to overlap each other a little bit. If I put 2 fabrics next to each other, wherever that intersection is, they can't be more than 6 deep at one time. So we could do 3 and 3 and make those 2 different colors. So I would come in here with this guy, and if I needed to, I would just make rough sizes and I would shift it off. I probably wouldn't try to find the shape because I would mess it up. So I would just place the pieces over. And if this has a straight line, I'd run it right along that straight blade right there and cut that. Okay, I hope that makes sense. And if you get to the point where you have your piece cut out already and you know that's the right shape, you could then come and you could rough cut a piece that's a little bit bigger and then lay that there. But something like what you're talking about, using the different fabrics in here, is a great scrap buster, because look at this wackadoodle piece that you might not be able to do anything with, but you could take an odd angle and throw it in here and actually use it in something, which would be really, really pretty cool. So if you fall in love with this die, you could have a little box that just says, whatever his name is again, Winding Ways, and you could have a Winding Ways box where you're pre-cutting a bunch of the pieces. Now, if you're working with a bob, bear in mind that not all pieces are symmetrical, where you could have right sides and wrong sides of fabric together. They may need to all be right side up, or you could put right sides together. So look at the instructions on the package, and that might be a good thing to write with your Sharpie. Right sides up if it needs right sides up, because if you cut it the other way, then they may not go back together to make your full block, okay, or your full project.
So it's 8:25 in Norway, p.m.
p.m. Oh, good
PM.
Evening.
Yep. And then somebody was wanting to know if we're going to have this on the website so they can view it again.
Oh, good question. Yes, it will be on our Facebook page, so you can go there, and when you go to the Quality Sewing Facebook page, you could look. It will say home and posts and photos, and it will say videos, and it will say live, and through either one of those you'll be able to watch this over and over again, because
and on YouTube.
Oh, and YouTube too, because who can't get enough of this, right? AccuQuilt is really pretty fun. But also remember, if there's any shopping you want to do, it's AccuQuilt, so ACCU10, and you can shop on our online store, or you can go into store as well and purchase there.
And how long is that 10% discount valid?
That 10% discount is valid for the next 30 seconds. No, through June 14th. It's Sunday, June 14th. So shop as many times as you want, and we will get you everything your heart desires and get you set up sorry, for using it and just having a great time. And if you have one and you haven't used it yet, find a project that you need cut out and cut out the whole thing ahead of time, and you will be in love. Because I tell you, I had mine sitting looking pretty for a little while before I actually used it. And then I was like, why'd I wait so long? It's kind of like the microwave, you know? Now we don't know what to do without the microwave. This thing is really, really saves tons of time and keeps those pieces accurate and perfect. So another question, yes?
Yep, another question is, so she knows that the AccuQuilt site has embroidery designs on it. Is there another place that would have complementary designs that would be used with AccuQuilt?
Well, as a matter of fact, okay, I'm going to be sassy for a minute, so I don't know is the real answer, but let's talk about that for a minute. But if you have a Luminaire or a Solaris, you could pop this right on down on your fabric, and it can find the edge and make an embroidery design for you. That's pretty fun. But I don't know of any other sites. I don't get out there and look very much and surf the web if I can help it. So I do not know if anyone is making any more. So I'm sorry.
Jacqueline would like to know, what tips or advice do you have for somebody just getting started out? What are the top things you need to know?
Okay, the top things that you need to know. Does Jacqueline have a machine yet, or are we just, let's assume she doesn't have a machine yet. So what you're going to want to do is figure out which style machine do you want. Do you want a powered one, or do you want a hand crank? This one has an 8-inch opening. This one can do the 10. But they're both beautiful, and the hand crank one is pretty easy to turn. So if that's the way to start, in fact, there's a set called a Ready, Set, Go, which is a great way to start. It has this guy in it, It has an 8-inch cube. It has the 2.5-inch strip cutter. So it basically has everything you need to get started. It's just ready in one box, which is a great way to go. So I would highly suggest you start with a cube because it has all the pieces that you need, and you can do so many different things with it. You're not stuck for that one quilt for the person that you don't even like.
She has the Go.
Oh, you have the Go. Perfect. So if you have the Go and you don't have a cube, get a cube. And the most common size or the most popular cube size is an 8-inch, but pick your cube based on the size of block that you like to make. So do you want to make, do you like making 10-inch blocks or 12-inch blocks? Whichever that is, that's the cube that you want to get. So start with that. Okay, so then the other thing to know is to keep your fabric, the straight of grain, going this way. So as it feeds in, the straight of grain is parallel with you this way. Okay, so you're facing that straight of grain. That will help your cuts be better. And if you're cutting, it will cut denim, it'll cut all those things, but remember to decrease the amount of layers you have if you're working with something thick and heavy like that. I hope that helps. Is there another question there, Carrie? I see you reading diligently.
Some of it's them talking to each other.
Oh, okay, that's nice. Isn't that fun to chat? It's kind of, you just have like 100 people in your sewing room with you. Isn't that fun? That's
Joy was saying that she made a baby quilt with the owls, which would be cute.
Oh, that owl die, he's up here. There's an owl die, and you can make all different animals with him. You can turn him upside down, and like his head can then, and his eyeballs become nostrils. You can make a cow. So funny. And then they're just so cute. So there's so many things you can do with that one. I bet that was cute.
So Jessica's asking, so keep the fabric straight on the grain even though some of the blocks are slightly turned?
That's a good question. Let me find my block. Okay, so your blocks are, when they're a square block, they're all kind of shifted a little bit here. In general, you keep it with you. You don't have to have it exactly parallel because then it's skewed here. So what I would do is I would lay this way so it's straight with the block, but in general, the length of grain is going parallel with me. But yes, you can skew your fabric to match the block, and that's okay. Right? That's a great question.
Jacqueline's asking, so the straight of grain and directional term means the same thing? I'll read that again.
Okay.
So straight of grain and directional mean the same thing?
Not necessarily. That is a fabulous question. Straight of grain is, have you ever noticed on your selvage that there's little pinholes on it? So when the fabric is woven, this edge, the straight of grain, is attached to the loom, and it has the lines of the threads of the fabric all going this way. Then the crossway grain is shuttled back and forth and woven into that. So it has more give than the straight of grain because the straight of grain is put on the loom first. Okay? Directional has to do with the print and which way is up. So if you have, this would work. If we have, and this is actually perfect, this panel, isn't it cute? It's up is up here. It's down is down there. So if I'm cutting something with this and it's going to matter which end is up, you want to be aware of which end is up. And in that case, you may need to sacrifice straight of grain for the end that's up. So that would be a unique choice that you make versus a general guideline. Okay. Now, if you notice this one, the up is not on grain. This is crosswise grain. This is my straight of grain. This is my crosswise grain. So if I'm putting this on the cutter and I needed my triangle to point this way and it's on the board that way, I would have to rotate that. But I would need to make, that's a conscious choice not a habit. Okay, so I hope that helps.
I think so, because she says, "Oh, I see." So I'm hoping that means she gets it.
Okay, good. All right. Well, in Norway, we've had dinner, and I think we're having an after-dinner cocktail and our dessert. So thank you for joining us from Norway. That's really cool. And if there's any other questions, you can feel free to ask as much as you want. But I think we've probably taken enough of your time, and I don't want to bore you, but it's really pretty fun. I think if you don't have an AccuQuilt, I encourage you to try one. If you have one, get it out and use it. And take a look at your pattern. I love, like I said, cutting out my patterns. I look at my pattern, and then I compare to my little, where'd my catalog go? The catalog, it shows you which sizes are in your go. I should pull out the go. But it will show you what sizes, and I look in there and see what compares to what I need in the quilt pattern, and then I can cut what I need based on that. So between my cubes and my strip cutters, there's not much I can't cut, and so I think that you'll find that way too. But we have a couple more questions. Yes,
these will be the last two questions. So are there any tricks for fussy cutting?
Okay, and then the second, or is the second question? I was just going to get both questions.
Okay, and then the second question was, are there still going to be classes for the AccuQuilt? Will they be in person or online or both?
Okay, good question. Okay, so fussy cutting. That's a great question because, for example, I made a mask out of the Seahawk fabric, and I wanted to make sure I had the Seahawk on one side and the helmet, and then I had the words on the other half. So one way you could do that, so if we take, let's pretend that's this. If you take and you cut out a piece out of paper and then cut an interior window, then you know where that piece, what you want to get that as a viewfinder. Oh, here, I know, I can pretend. Oh, unless you don't put your scissors up. Okay, so we'll say that this is my piece of paper. You can use fabric too. I was just talking about paper because it would be, everybody has that. But then you could take that and figure out where you want your item to be, and then just make sure you get that. And I will do a peek. I peek up to make sure I'm kind of in the right spot. Okay, so I lift up and say, oh, am I on that? Yep, I'm on it. I'm good to go. Okay, so that's one way you can do fussy cutting, and that's a great idea. And if you're doing something like this out of a pretty pattern, and you stack that same exact pattern right over each other, you could get a really kind of neat kaleidoscope looking piece. So that's a great idea to do that. And then the other one, I shouldn't have asked for the second question because I already forgot.
Will AccuQuilt classes continue online,
yes.
in person?
So we are now open, as I mentioned. So if you're coming in late, our stores are open. We're really excited about that. But you're going to see a combination in general on both things. We're going to have some in-store classes, and then we're also going to continue some online on a temporary basis, because even though our stores are open, the environment isn't such where we are comfortable holding large classes in any store location. We want to keep everyone safe, so we will have classes, but they will be small. Okay, so in that regard, we will be continuing on various types of online seminars and classes and informationals. So we will do that until the time when we can all meet back in store in mass, and so we look forward to that time, but at this time we have to be a little bit flexible and go both ways, and so you will see a little bit of both. And specifically pertaining to AccuQuilt, at this time I don't have anything specific on the calendar for an AccuQuilt for an online, but it's an ever shifting environment, and I'm trying to get as many classes going online as we can, so I can't say for sure that wouldn't change, but at this moment I don't have anything booked on the calendar at this minute. So I hope that answers that. Okay, so remember, if you have any shopping that you do want to do, I know a lot of you are excited about the idea of using up your scraps and maybe making some Christmas stockings, or maybe a cute little stuffed gingerbread man. Wouldn't that be so? I think that'd be so cute. You could put like little clothes on it. It doesn't have to be gingerbread man. You can make a doll. That'd be so cute. Anyway, you can get your extra 10% off that. The code is AccuQ10, so ACCU10, and put that in your shopping cart at the end, and that will take that extra 10% off your shopping cart of all AccuQuilt dyes, single dyes and mats. You'll find the machines and the cubes already at a discounted price, so there isn't the extra 10% on that. But other than that, we're good to go there. And any more questions? Are we good, Carrie?
Nope, everyone just wanted to tell you you're awesome.
Oh, well, isn't that sweet? I paid you all in advance, I'm sure.
I lied. There's one more question. Can they get the 10% in stores, or is it just online?
Oh, go in store if you'd like to. And we'll try to send out a quick note to remind the stores that there is the discount. So if you give us a couple of minutes before you break down the store's door, we'll make sure that they know that there is that coupon code. So we'll do that immediately following this. It's something that just slipped our mind. We were so excited about getting the stores open that we forgot to tell them about the discount code for this event. So we'll make sure that they get that. So shop in store as much as you want. Make sure you pick up your flyer, this one, or catalog, and the cube flyer should be in the store, and we'll get you all sewing. So have a fabulous day. Come visit, and remember, the Tuckwilla store now has fabric. You can come in and play with that.
They're asking for a quick scan of fabric, so we will
yeah,
give them.
Fabric is pretty, isn't it pretty?
So this is Tuckwilla.
And then the back side has McKenna Ryan, and it has grunge.
Oh, sorry, didn't mean to give you all motion sickness there.
And then we have over here, I'll give you a quick little tour. We have Kay Fawcett, and then we also have some beautiful solids. We have Kimberbell. We also have Stellaire, and this is by Ruby Star Society. And then we also have on that side that you saw first, we have Abby Rose. This one is Moda, Abby Rose. And then below that, we have the Moda, and it's got the Seattle stuff. It's so cute. It's got the fish and all Pacific Northwest type things. And so that's really, really pretty fun. And then there are more that are in boxes that we could not fit on the wall. So if you come in, oh, you're giving them a sneak peek. She was not the person at Christmas to hide secrets from the kids. Okay, so yes, we have more, and we have more fixtures that are coming. So as soon as the fixtures are up, then we're going to put even more out. And so we have some really cool stuff. And as she gave you that little sneak, it's Tula Pink. So that one's in there, and then there should be another one in there, or maybe isn't here yet, that's really cool. It's got some cool veggies. It's really awesome. So we're really excited about that. So we invite you to come and explore that. And come into our stores. We're open, and shop online for AccuQuilt. It's ACCU10 is the code, so AccuQ10, and you'll get 10% off.
Last question.
Last
and then
question.
We'll let you sign out. So does the So Fun discount apply to fabric?
Well, I don't see why not. So yeah, so shop to your heart's content, and yes, the fabric is also your So Fun discount will apply on the regular price of the fabric. So absolutely. And in July, our Everett store will also have fabric in their big, beautiful new space. So we look forward to sharing with you that new store location here in just a few weeks. So thanks for joining us, and we will see you later.